Final Fantasy VI is a role-playing video game developed and published by Square for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Released in 1994, it is the sixth title in the mainline Final Fantasy series. Set in a fantasy world with a technology level equivalent to that of the Second Industrial Revolution, the game's story focuses on a group of rebels as they seek to overthrow an imperial dictatorship. The game features 14 permanent playable characters, the most of any game in the main series. It was ported by TOS with minor differences to Sony's PlayStation in 1999 and Nintendo's Game Boy Advance in 2006. And it was released for the Wii's Virtual Console in Japan in March 15, 2011, followed by the PAL region on March 18, 2011 and North America on June 30, 2011. The game was known as Final Fantasy III when it was first released in North America, as the original Final Fantasy III and Final Fantasy V had not been released outside Japan at the time. However, most later localizations used the original title. Final Fantasy VI was the first game in the series to be directed by someone other than producer and series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi. The role was filled instead by Yoshinori Kitase and Hiroyuki Ito. Yoshitaka Amano, a longtime contributor to the Final Fantasy series, returned as the image and character designer, while regular composer Nobuo Uematsu wrote the game's score, which has been released on several soundtrack albums. Final Fantasy VI was released to critical acclaim and is seen as a landmark title for the role-playing genre. For instance, it was ranked as the #1 RPG of all time by IGN. Its Super Nintendo and PlayStation versions have sold over 3.48 million copies worldwide to date as a standalone game, as well as over 750,000 copies as part of the Japanese Final Fantasy Collection and the North American Final Fantasy Anthology. Final Fantasy VI has won numerous awards since its release. Gameplay. Like previous Final Fantasy installments, Final Fantasy VI consists of 4 basic modes of gameplay: an overworld map, town and dungeon field maps, a battle screen, and a menu screen. The overworld map is a scaled-down version of the game's fictional world, which the player uses to direct characters to various locations. As with most games in the series, the 3 primary means of travel across the overworld are by foot, chocobo, and airship. With a few plot-driven exceptions, enemies are randomly encountered on field maps and on the overworld when traveling by foot. The menu screen is where the player makes such decisions as which characters will be in the traveling party, which equipment they wield, the magic they learn, and the configuration of the gameplay. It is also used to track experience points and levels. The game's plot develops as the player progresses through towns and dungeons. Town citizens will offer helpful information and some residents own item or equipment shops. Later in the game, visiting certain towns will activate side quests. Dungeons appear as a variety of areas, including caves, sewers, forests, and buildings. These dungeons often have treasure chests containing rare items that are not available in most stores. Some dungeons feature puzzles and mazes, which require the player to divide the characters into multiple parties. Combat in Final Fantasy VI is menu-based, in which the player selects an action from a list of such options as fight, magic, and item. A maximum of 4 characters may be used in battles, which are based on the series' traditional active time battle system first featured in Final Fantasy IV. Under this system, each character has an action bar that replenishes itself at a rate dependent on their speed statistic. When a character's action bar is filled, the player may assign an action. In addition to standard battle techniques, each character possesses a unique special ability. For example, Locke possesses the ability to steal items from enemies, while Celeste's runic ability allows her to absorb most magical attacks cast until her next turn. Another element is a powerful attack substitution that occasionally appears when a character's health is low. Similar features appear in later Final Fantasy titles under a variety of different names, including limit breaks, desperation moves, trances, and overdrives. Characters are rewarded for victorious battles with experience points and money, called gil in the original North American localization. When characters attain a certain amount of experience points, they gain a level which increases their statistics. An additional player may play during battle scenarios, with control of individual characters assigned from the configuration menu. Customization characters in Final Fantasy VI can be equipped with a wide variety of weapons, armor and accessories to increase their statistics and obtain special abilities. Most of this equipment can be used by several different characters, and each character may equip up to 2 relics. Relics have a variety of uses and effects, some of which alter basic battle commands, allow characters to use multiple weapons, provide permanent status changes during battle, or use protective magical spells in response to being near death. Although only 2 characters start the game with the ability to use magic, almost every character can learn to do so. Characters may equip Magicite, which enables the summoning of espers, this game's incarnation of summoned monsters, as well as that of specific magic spells. If a character has a piece of Magicite equipped, he or she will gain magic acquisition points after most battles. As a character gains his magic cap, he or she gradually learns spells from the Magicite equipped and will gain additional statistic bonuses when leveling up, depending on the Magicite. Plot. Setting: Final Fantasy VI takes place on a large, unnamed world. During the course of the game, its geography and landscape change due to various developments in the game's plot. During the first half of the game, the world is divided into 3 major continents and referred to as the World of Balance. The northern continent is punctuated by a series of mountain ranges and contains many of the locations accessible to the player. Most of the southern continent has been taken over by the Empire, while the eastern continent is home to a large patch of land called the Veldt where monsters from all over the world can be found. Halfway through the game, the world's geographical layout is altered, resulting in its 3 large continents splitting into several islands of various size situated around a larger continent at their center. This altered layout of the game's locations is referred to as the World of Ruin. In contrast to the medieval settings featured in previous Final Fantasy titles, Final Fantasy VI is set in a steampunk environment. The structure of society parallels that of the latter half of the 19th century, with opera and the fine arts serving as recurring motifs throughout the game, and a level of technology comparable to that of the Second Industrial Revolution. Railroads and steamships are in use, and a coal mining operation is run in the northern town of Nasha. Additionally, several examples of modern engineering and weaponry have been developed in the Kingdom of Figaro. However, communication systems have not reached significant levels of development, with letters sent by way of carrier pigeons serving as the most common means of long-distance communication. 1,000 years before the events of the game, 3 entities known as the Warring Triad initiated a conflict that would come to be called the War of the Magi. This quarrel grew to catastrophic proportions, unleashing magical energy into the world which transformed afflicted humans into espers, magical beings who themselves were used as soldiers in the war. Eventually realizing the horrific calamity wrought by their hands, the Triad returned free will to the espers and sealed their own powers, becoming stone statues. Their only request was that the espers ensure their power remain locked away so it might never be used again. The espers carried their stone gods to a hidden land, sealing both the statues and themselves off from the realm of humans. The concept of magic gradually faded to legend and myth as mankind built a society extolling science and technology. At the game's opening, the most advanced nation is the Empire, a cruel and expanding dictatorship led by Emperor Gestahl and his clownish general Kefka Palazzo. Approximately 18 years before the events of the game begin, the barrier between the Esper's land and the rest of the world weakened. Soon after, Gestahl takes advantage of this and attacks the Esper's land, capturing several of them. Using the Espers as a power source, Gestahl initiated a research program to combine magic with machinery and infuse humans with magical powers, the result being a craft known as Magitech. Kefka became the first experimental prototype of a line of magically empowered soldiers called Magitech Knights, drastically impairing his sanity. Magitech innovations have allowed the Empire to supplement its forces with mechanical infantry, armed with Magitech-powered weaponry. At the opening of the game, the Empire is on the verge of rediscovering the full potential of magic by reopening the gateway to the world of the Espers. However, Gestahl's military dominion is opposed by the Returners, a rebel organization seeking to overthrow the Empire and free its territories. Characters. Final Fantasy VI features 14 permanent playable characters, the most of any game in the main series, as well as several secondary characters who are only briefly controlled by the player. The starting character, Terra Branford, is a reserved half-human, half-Esper girl who spent most of her life as a slave to the Empire, thanks to a mind-controlling device, and is unfamiliar with love. Other primary characters include Locke Cole, a treasure hunter and rebel sympathizer with a powerful impulse to protect women; Celis Share, a former general of the Empire, who joined the Returners after being jailed for questioning imperial practices; Edgar Figaro, a consummate womanizer and the King of Figaro, who claims allegiance to the Empire while secretly supplying aid to the Returners; Sabin Rene Figaro, Edgar's brother, who fled the royal court in order to pursue his own path and hone his martial arts skills; Cyan Garamond, a loyal knight to the Kingdom of Doma who lost his family and friends as a result of Kefka poisoning the kingdom's water supply; Set Zagabiani, a habitual gambler and thrill-seeker and owner of the world's only airship; Shadow, a ninja mercenary, who offers his services to both the Empire and the Returners at various stages throughout the game; Rel Maroni, a young but tough artistic girl with magical powers; Strago Magus, Relm's elderly grandfather and a blue mage; Gau, a feral child surviving since infancy in the harsh wilderness known as the Veldt; Mog, a Moogle from the mines of Nasha; Umaro, a savage but loyal Sasquatch also from Nasha, talked into joining the Returners through Mog's persuasion; and Gogo, a mysterious, fully shrouded master of the art of mimicry. Most of the main characters in the game hold a significant grudge against the Empire and, in particular, Kefka Palazzo, who serves as one of the game's main antagonists along with Emperor Gestahl. The supporting character Ultras serves as a recurring villain and comic relief throughout the game. A handful of Final Fantasy VI characters have reappeared in later games, such as Secret of Evermore. Additionally, Final Fantasy SGI, a short tech demo produced for the Silicon Graphics Onyx workstation, featured polygon-based 3D renderings of Locke, Terra, and Shadow. Story. Final Fantasy VI begins with Terra Branford participating in an Imperial raid on Nasha in search of a recently unearthed frozen Esper found in the city's mines. The Esper then kills Terra's controllers and breaks the Imperial control over her, but she is unable to remember anything about her past. Locke Cole, a treasure hunter, promises to protect her until she can regain her memories and helps her escape to the hideout of the Returners, a group of militants opposing the Empire. Along the way, they pass through the Kingdom of Figaro and meet Edgar Roni Figaro, the king, and his estranged brother, Sabin Rene Figaro, who join them. Banon, the leader of the Returners, asks for Terra's help in their struggle against the Empire, and she agrees. Just as the Resistance is preparing to return to Narsha to investigate the frozen Esper, the Empire attacks South Figaro. Locke heads to the besieged town to slow the Empire's advance, while the rest of the group makes their way via rafting down the nearby Lethe River. However, Saban is separated from the group after a battle with Ultras, self-proclaimed Octopus royalty, and a recurring antagonist, forcing the various members of the Returners to find their own ways to Narsha in 3 different scenarios controlled by the player. In Locke's scenario, he must escape the Imperial-occupied town of South Figaro without detection. Saban has been swept to a distant continent and must find a way back, while Terra, Edgar, and Bannon will continue to float down the Lethe River back to Narsha. Eventually, the original party reunites in Narsha. Locke brings with him Celis Share, one of the Empire's own generals, whom he saved from execution for defying the Empire's ruthless practices. Saban brings with him Cyan Garamond, whose family was killed during the Empire's siege of Doma Castle when Kefka Palazzo ordered the water supply poisoned, and Gau, a feral child he befriended on the Veldt. In Narsha, the Returners prepare to defend the frozen Esper from the Empire. After the player successfully thwarts the Imperial invasion, Terra approaches the frozen Esper, prompting her to transform into an Esper-like form herself. She flies away, confused and horrified by her own transformation. The Returners set out to search for Terra and eventually trace her to the city of Zozo, though they are still shocked by her apparent existence as an Esper. There, they also meet the Esper Ramu, who tells them that if they free various other Espers from the Magitech research facility in the Empire's capital, Vector, they may find one who can help Terra. Vector is on the southern continent, to which the Empire does not allow maritime access. So the Returners go to the Opera House and recruit Set Zagabiani, who is believed to be the owner of the Blackjack, the only airship in the world. They then travel to Vector and attempt to rescue several Espers, including Maduin, who is revealed to be Terra's father. However, the Espers are already dying from the experiments at Vector, and choose instead to give their lives to transform into magicite, the crystallized remains of the Espers' essences that form when they die, and allow others to use their powers. The dying Espers bestow their magicite upon the Returners. Before the group can then escape, Kefka arrives and causes the Returners, including Locke, to momentarily doubt Celeste's loyalty, much to her anguish. However, she provides proof to them of her support by covering for the group while the rest escape. The rest of the group then returns to Zozo, where Terra reacts to the magicite of her father, prompting her to gain knowledge of her past and accept herself as the half-human, half-Esper child of Maduin and a human woman. After reuniting with Terra, the Returners decide that it is time to launch an all-out attack on the Empire, and Bannon asks Terra to attempt contacting the Esper's land in order to gain their support. Terra succeeds in making contact, and when the Espers learn that the others captured by the Empire previously have now perished, they become infuriated and enter the human world, where they destroy much of Vector. When the Returners arrive in the capital, they find Emperor Gestal claiming to no longer have the will to fight, inviting the Returners to a banquet to negotiate peace. Gestal asks Terra to deliver a truce to the Espers on his behalf, to which she agrees. Accompanied by Locke, Shadow, Generals Celis and Leo, the player must then guide Terra to the remote village Thamasa in search of the Espers, where they meet Strago Magus and his granddaughter, Rel Maroni, who also accompany them. Soon, they find the Espers and Terra convinces them to accept a truce with Gestal. However, during the negotiations, Kefka attacks the Espers, killing each of those still alive and capturing the magicite that remains from their essence. Additionally, he kills General Leo, who is appalled by Kefka's dishonorable tactics and attempts to defend the Espers. The Returners reunite, now aware that the peace was a ploy for Gestal to obtain magicite and the stone statue remains of the warring triad within the Espers now unsealed land. Kefka and Gestalt travel through the open gate to the Esper world, find the warring triad, and prompt the island on which the Esper world is located to detach and fly in the sky as an ominous floating continent. The returners attempt to stop them from causing further damage, but despite their efforts, they are unable to prevent Kefka and Gestalt from gaining the power of the statues. Now empowered, Kefka promptly kills Gestalt and moves the statues out of their proper alignment, upsetting the balance of magical power and causing the destruction of most of the surface world. In the disaster, the returners are separated from one another as Setz's airship is torn apart. 1 year later, Celes awakens from a coma on a deserted island and learns that the world has been devastated by Kefka, who now dominates it as a god-like ruler. Much of the human population has died and plant and animal life are slowly being killed by sickness, punctuating humanity's despair. Celes sets out from the solitary island to try to reunite with as many of her friends as she can find. One by one, in a series of mostly optional side quests, the player has the opportunity to reunite the group, all still alive, as well as new allies Amaro and Gogo. Together, the reunited returners launch a new offensive against Kefka, using the Falcon, an airship that belonged to a deceased friend of Setz's, to reach Kefka's tower and infiltrate it. Inside, the returners battle their way through Kefka's defenses and destroy the 3 statues, the source of Kefka's newfound power. When destroying the statues, once the source of all magic, does not cause any noticeable reaction. The party realizes that Kefka has successfully drained the warring triad of power and has become the source of all magical power. Making a final stand against Kefka, the characters destroy him. But since the god's power had come to reside in him, all magicite begins to shatter and Kefka's magically maintained tower begins to crumble. Terror leads the characters out as she begins to weaken due to her half-Esper heritage. However, before her father's magicite shatters, his spirit informs her that by holding to the human side of herself, she may survive the passing of magic. In the end, the party escapes Kefka's tower aboard the Falcon. Terror survives, and the group observes the world's communities rejuvenating themselves.